The timestamp on the grainy security footage reads 4:12 a.m. In the silent, flickering light of a downtown street, a man appears. He is dressed in dark clothing, his head down, shoulders tensed. He isn't walking alone. He is dragging a large, heavy green compost bin across the pavement. The wheels of the plastic container screech against the asphalt, a sound that should have woken the neighborhood, but the streets are dead quiet. The man pauses for a second, catching his breath. He looks around, his eyes darting toward the shadows, checking if anyone is watching. He doesn't know that high above him, a lens is recording his every move. Inside that green bin isn't yard waste or kitchen scrap. Tucked beneath the lid, hidden in the darkness, is the body of 36-year-old Catherine Campbell. Just 1 hour ago, she was laughing. She was dancing. She was a respected police officer with a bright future. Now, she is being wheeled through the city like a bag of trash. The man pulling the bin is Christopher Garnier. He is a trained paramedic, a man whose entire job was to save lives. But tonight, he used that medical knowledge for something else. He used his hands to ensure Catherine would never take another breath. As Christopher reaches a dark overpass near the harbor, he stops. This is the spot. He tips the bin over, and the weight of the decorated officer hits the dirt with a dull thud. He doesn't look at her face. He doesn't say a prayer. He simply reaches into a nearby pile of debris and pulls out a large wooden box, sliding it over her body to hide her from the world. He thinks he's won. He thinks that by the time the sun comes up, he'll be back in bed and this will all be a bad dream. He walks away, leaving the bin behind, disappearing into the morning mist. But there is a problem Christopher didn't count on. In his rush to clean the scene, he forgot something vital inside his car. As he walks back to the apartment, he realizes he left a trail of evidence so obvious that even a rookie cop could follow it. And as the sun begins to rise over the city, the search for a missing hero is about to begin. A search that will lead investigators directly to a man who is currently smiling at a birthday party, pretending he isn't a monster. But the most terrifying part isn't what he did that night. It's what the police found sitting in the back of his car just a few days later, proving that Christopher wasn't finished with Catherine's body just yet. The police didn't know it yet, but the clock was already ticking. While Christopher Garnier was walking home from that dark overpass, Catherine Campbell's family was starting their day, unaware that their world had already collapsed. To understand how a hero ended up in a trash bin, we have to go back to the beginning of that fateful night. Catherine was a constable, a police officer in the small town of Truro. She was the kind of person who ran toward danger while everyone else ran away. She was tough, she was kind, and she was incredibly reliable. If Catherine said she'd be at work at 8 a.m., she was there at 7:45. On Thursday, September 10th, Catherine finished a long shift at the police station. She was tired, but she was in a good mood. She decided to drive to the nearby city of Halifax to blow off some steam. She traded her heavy police vest and belt for a nice outfit. She wanted to be just Catherine for a night, not the officer everyone looked to for help. She headed to a popular spot called the Halifax Ale House. The music was loud, the lights were dim, and the floor was crowded with people laughing and dancing. That's where she saw him, Christopher Garnier. Christopher was 27, nearly 10 years younger than Catherine. He was handsome and seemed charming. He told people he was a paramedic, a job that usually means you are a protector. But Christopher was hiding a dark secret. He had recently lost his job, and his long-term girlfriend had just broken up with him. He wasn't at the bar to make friends. He was a pressure cooker of stress and anger looking for a place to explode. When he saw Catherine, he didn't see a police officer. He saw a target. Witnesses later said the two of them hit it off instantly. They were seen dancing close, whispering, and kissing. To anyone watching, it looked like a normal, happy night out. At 3:15 a.m., the two of them walked out of the bar together. CCTV cameras captured them standing on the sidewalk, Catherine smiling and leaning into him. They hailed a taxi and headed toward an apartment on Macaulay Street. The taxi driver later told police that something felt off. He said the air in the car felt heavy, like there was a hidden tension between the two strangers. He dropped them off at the curb and watched them walk into the building. He had no idea he was the last person to see Catherine Campbell alive. Inside the apartment, the mood shifted instantly. This wasn't Christopher's home. It belonged to a friend who was away. They were completely alone. No one knows exactly what triggered the violence. Maybe Catherine realized Christopher wasn't who he pretended to be. Maybe she tried to leave. But Christopher, using the strength he'd gained as a bar bouncer and the knowledge of the human body he'd learned as a paramedic, attacked. He didn't just hit her. He unleashed a level of brutality that was pure evil. He punched her with such force that he broke her nose and blackened both of her eyes. Then, he did the unthinkable. He put his hands around her throat. He knew exactly where to press to stop the blood from reaching her brain. He held on as she struggled. He held on as she gasped for air. He held on until the life left her eyes. When it was over, Christopher didn't call 911. He didn't try to perform CPR, even though he knew how. Instead, he looked around the room and saw a mattress on a pull-out sofa. He realized the blood was everywhere. He didn't panic. He went into cleanup mode. He grabbed that green compost bin from outside and dragged it into the room. He stuffed the decorated officer inside, but the lid wouldn't close. To make her fit, he had to do something so gruesome it made seasoned investigators sick to their stomachs, and just as he was about to wheel her out, he heard a noise at the front door. Christopher froze. The sound at the door was the heavy metallic click of a key turning in the lock. His heart hammered against his ribs as he stood over the green bin. But the door didn't open. It was just a neighbor in the hallway, or perhaps his mind playing tricks on him in the silence of the crime scene. He took a jagged breath and realized he couldn't stay here much longer. He grabbed a roll of tape and some plastic, trying to seal the evidence of his struggle. He dragged the bin out, the wheels thudding down the stairs, and completed the grim journey to the overpass that we saw earlier. When Christopher returned to the apartment, he didn't collapse in guilt. He didn't cry. He looked at the floor where Catherine had died and saw the blood. He grabbed a bottle of bleach and began to scrub. He worked with the precision of a surgeon, wiping down the Xbox, the television, and the cupboard handles. He noticed the mattress on the pull-out bed was soaked with evidence. Without a second thought, he dragged the heavy mattress out of the building and threw it into a dumpster. When his friend Mitchell, the owner of the apartment, returned later that morning, he found Christopher sleeping peacefully on the sofa. "Where's the mattress?" Mitchell asked, rubbing his eyes. Christopher didn't even flinch. He looked his friend in the eye and lied with total calm. "I got sick last night," Christopher said. "I puked all over it. I felt so bad about the mess that I just hauled it to the trash. I'll buy you a brand new one, man." "Sorry about that." Mitchell, still groggy from his own night out, shrugged it off. He had no reason to doubt his friend. He didn't know that the mess Christopher had disposed of wasn't vomit, it was the lifeblood of a missing woman. But while Christopher was playing the part of a helpful friend, the alarm bells were starting to ring in the town of Truro. Monday morning arrived, and for the first time in 6 years, Constable Catherine Campbell didn't show up for her shift. Her supervisor called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. They called her apartment. No answer. This was a woman who lived for her job. Within hours, the Truro Police Department contacted the Halifax authorities. "One of our own is missing," they said. The search began with a visit to her apartment, where they found her car parked out front and her toothbrush still in the bathroom. She hadn't left town, she had vanished into thin air. Investigators began the tedious work of retracing her final step. They pulled the CCTV footage from the Halifax alehouse. They saw Catherine dancing. They saw her laughing. And then, they saw him. They saw the young man with the intense eyes leaving with her. They tracked the taxi driver, who confirmed he dropped them off at Macaulay Street. The net was beginning to close around Christopher Garnier, but he was already one step ahead. He wasn't hiding in a basement or fleeing the province. Instead, he went to his father's birthday party. He sat at a table with his family, eating cake and sharing stories, while Catherine's body lay rotting under a wooden box just a few miles away. On Tuesday, 5 days after the murder, a tip led police to the overpass near the bridge. An officer noticed a heavy, out-of-place wooden box. When he lifted it, the smell of death hit him instantly. It was Catherine. The news broke across the country. A hero had been found in the dirt. But the police didn't have to look far for the killer. They had been watching Christopher. Just 1 hour after finding the body, they pulled him over in his car. They expected to find a man in shock. Instead, they found a man who was prepared for a war. As they searched his trunk, they pulled out a backpack filled with clothes, a passport, and a half-full 5-liter can of gasoline. He wasn't just planning to run. He was planning to go back to the body to burn the evidence. But there was something even more disturbing found in his search history that proved this wasn't just a crime of passion. Inside the interrogation room, the air was cold. Christopher Garnier sat slumped in a chair, his face a mask of exhaustion. For 9.5 hours, detectives grilled him. They showed him the CCTV footage of the green bin. They showed him photos of the blood they had found using special chemicals in the Macaulay Street apartment, spots on the Xbox, splatters on the wall that he had missed in the dark. At first, Christopher tried to play a clever game. He claimed he had blacked out. He told the detectives he couldn't remember anything after leaving the bar. But the detectives were smarter. They had seized his computer and found his recent search history. Christopher hadn't been searching for how to help a friend or how to deal with grief. He had been researching memory loss due to antidepressants and how alcohol affects the brain. He was trying to build a medical excuse before he was even caught. When the lead detective leaned in and asked, "You're a paramedic, Christopher. How did you know she was dead?" Christopher finally broke. His voice was a whisper as he admitted, she wasn't breathing. He confessed to the killing, but he did it with a chilling lack of emotion, describing the life-saving hands of a medic becoming the weapons of a murderer. The public was outraged. As the details of the compost bin murder hit the headlines, people couldn't believe the cruelty. But as the trial began in 2017, the defense team launched a strategy that turned the city's grief into pure fury. They didn't deny that Christopher killed Catherine. Instead, they tried to blame the victim. They claimed that Catherine, a trained police officer, had asked for rough sex, and that her death was a tragic accident. They argued that because she was an officer, she could have fought back if she wanted to, ignoring the fact that she had been brutally punched and blindsided by a man she thought she could trust. The courtroom was filled with Catherine's fellow officers, sitting tall in their dress uniforms, their faces stony as they listened to the defense drag their friend's name through the mud. But the most shocking moment came when the defense brought up Christopher's own health. They argued that Christopher was a victim, too. They claimed he was suffering from PTSD. But he didn't have PTSD from a war or a car accident. They claimed he had PTSD from the trauma of killing Catherine. They wanted the jury to feel sorry for the man who had stuffed a human being into a trash can because the memory of it gave him nightmares. The tension in the courtroom reached a boiling point. Catherine's mother sat in the front row, clutching a photo of her daughter, forced to listen to the killer's family talk about his suffering. The defense even revealed that Christopher was receiving special government benefits for his mental health, benefits usually reserved for war veterans. The idea that a murderer was being paid by taxpayers to recover from his own crime sent a shockwave through the entire country. The jury went into deliberation, and for 2 days, the city held its breath. When they finally returned, the verdict was guilty on all counts. Christopher was sentenced to life in prison. But as he was led away in handcuffs, a final, dark secret emerged that threatened to let him walk free much sooner than anyone expected. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the sentence. Life in prison with no chance of parole for at least 13.5 years. Catherine's family finally felt they could breathe. The man who had treated their daughter like garbage was finally going where he belonged. But the victory felt hollow. Christopher Garnier didn't look like a man defeated. He looked like a man with a plan. Even after being sent to a maximum security prison, he continued to fight. He filed an appeal, claiming his confession should never have been used and that his trauma made the trial unfair. While he sat in his cell, the public learned the full extent of the insult to Catherine's memory. Because Christopher's father had served in the military, the government was legally required to pay for Christopher's trauma counseling. This meant that while Catherine's family was struggling to pay for her funeral and deal with their own crushing grief, the man who killed her was getting world-class therapy sessions funded by the very people Catherine had died protecting. It was a loophole in the law that felt like a second murder. The community took to the streets, demanding the laws be changed so that murderers could never benefit from the service of their family members. But the most chilling part of the story wasn't the legal battle. It was the behavior of those Christopher left behind. His girlfriend, the one he had broken up with right before the murder, didn't run away in horror. Instead, she stood by him. She wrote letters to the court describing him as the kindest man she knew. She claimed he had saved her life, and that she couldn't wait for him to come home so they could start a family. It was a terrifying reminder of how some people can look directly at a monster and choose to see a prince. She ignored the blood on the Xbox, the mattress in the trash, and the 45 minutes of pure terror Catherine Campbell endured in that apartment. Today, the Halifax Ale House still glows with neon lights every night. People still walk past the apartment on Macaulay Street, most of them having no idea what happened inside those walls. But for the police force in Truro, things will never be the same. They kept Catherine's locker exactly the way she left it for a long time, a reminder of a dedicated officer who just wanted one night to be herself. They remember her not for how she died, but for how she lived. She was a woman who volunteered as a firefighter, who rescued people from burning buildings, and who believed in the goodness of others. Christopher Garnier remains behind bars, but he will be eligible for parole sooner than most people think. In just a few years, he could be walking the same streets where he once dragged that green bin. The case remains a dark stain on the city, a warning that the most dangerous person in the room isn't always the one shouting. Sometimes it's the charming stranger with a paramedic's badge and a hidden rage. Catherine Campbell had 45 minutes to live when she left that bar, and in that short time, a lifetime of service was erased by a man who thought he could hide his sins in a trash can. But the cameras were watching, the blood told the truth, and Catherine's legacy as a hero will always outshine the cowardice of the man who took her life.